Starting with Colossians 1:9, it's really important to start phrasing these verses if you're not already. There's lots of little phrases, and it's really important to know which phrase hooks into which word. Diatuta kai hemes, af heis hemeras ekusamen, u pauamatha huper humon, prasiukamenoi kai etumenoi, hina plerotheta ten epigenosin to thelematas autou, in passe sophia kai sunese pneumatike. Therefore, and we know that diatuta is an idiom that just means therefore. Also, in other words, in addition to what I've been saying, we, and this is that expression we saw in verse 6, it's idiomatic. The full version would be aftes hemeros heis, but it's from which day we heard, right? Simple aorist of akuo, comma, we have not ceased on behalf of you all two things, praying and requesting, so substantival use of the participles, that you might be filled, right? Aorist passive, second plural. You might be filled with the knowledge of His will in all wisdom and spiritual understanding. Okay, a couple of things. Itumenoi is your present middle passive, probably here a middle. And one of the questions you'll have to ask is, what is the significance of the middle? Is it something that you can feel? But since we don't have a middle in English, you'll probably just translate it as an active. They've been praying and they've been requesting that you be filled with the knowledge. Now, what's going on here? Well, this is called an accusative of respect. In other words, you might be filled, well, with what? You might be filled with respect to the knowledge. So we just say, you might be filled with the knowledge of His will. So accusative of respect. It's also called an accusative of reference. This is when you can use the keywords with respect to or with. Might be filled with the knowledge of His will in all wisdom and this is a really interesting question. Lowercase s or uppercase s? If you look at the translations, they all say spiritual understanding except one, the NIV. I often joke that I think Gordon Fee joined the NIV committee to capitalize as many of the spirits as possible. It's certainly true that when it comes to the words meaning spirit or something related to it, the NIV is much more sensitive to the fact that it's probably the Holy Spirit. What is a spiritual understanding? I mean, it actually doesn't make any sense, does it? Which is why the NIV says, and actually instead of translating plerotheta as a passive, they make it an active and supply the subject. Ask God to fill you with the knowledge of His will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit, capital S, gives. So English doesn't like passives, and so the NIV and modern translations often turn them into actives, but then you got to supply the subject that God might fill, and then capitalize this, that it's a spiritual understanding, in that it's this understanding that the Spirit gives. That's how God fills us with the knowledge of His will through the working of the Holy Spirit. And so I think the NIV is definitely right in capitalizing this word, even though no one else does. So if we're going to phrase it, we'll break it there, break it there. We're going to have to come back and shrink the text in all wisdom and spiritual understanding. Let's go ahead and shrink the text right now. So we've got to get hemes with its verb somehow. Break it there. And then He's not ceased doing what? Well, two things. So I'm just going to use a tab. Get those two participles over there. And we're going to need some extra room. fact, let's go back up to the beginning and start it. So for this reason also, there's your connector, we, and then the prepositional phrase has to go over the verb. From the day that we heard it, we have not ceased on behalf of you, praying and asking. Well, praying and asking what? So we're going to pull this in. We'll draw a line. So maybe bracket those two and draw the line back to the henna. They've been praying, requesting that you might be filled with the knowledge of his will, and that you might be filled in all wisdom, and if you wanted to be very specific, you could do it like this: in all wisdom, and get those lined up. So for this reason also we, from the day that we heard of their faith, we have not ceased. You know what you may want to do is to make this clear. You could put an arrow that we, and then what you're going to do is indent this so the arrows can kind of line up. And that means this is going to have to go over further. And then you could draw an arrow there. But that means that we're going to have to move all this stuff over. So that works out. So for this reason also, we, from which day we've heard, we have not ceased on behalf of you, praying and requesting, what? That you be filled with the knowledge of his will, and that this filling be done in all wisdom and with this understanding that the Spirit gives.